In this video, I will offer some ideas for presenting information in a brain-friendly manner. First, I will show you an overview of the human memory in order to explain some of the challenges and possibilities for facilitating active learning. And in the second part, I will highlight some principles to keep in mind when presenting content, and I will also outline some methods I personally find useful for delivering information to learners. If you want to make the most of this lecture, I recommend to pause this video for a couple of minutes and reflect for a moment on what you already know about this topic and what questions you might want to get answers to in this video lecture. I hope you have noted down some points. Later on, you will understand why I included this activity here, but for the moment, let's move on. Here you see an overview of the different parts of the human memory. I want to stress that I am not a neuroscientist. To my best knowledge, this model is quite accurate, but I use it in the first place as a model to highlight aspects to be aware of when speaking about brain-friendly learning. For this, it is helpful to understand how our different memories interact. The short-term memory acts like a radar that observes what is happening around us. Most information it perceives does not require any further attention and therefore goes by unnoticed. This is my first conclusion for brain-friendly presentation of content. We have to gain and obtain our audience's focus. If something important happens, the short-term memory passes this information on to the working memory, which has the task to make a decision what to do next. The capacity of the working memory, as most of you probably have heard, is limited to about 5 chunks of information. This is my second conclusion. It is important to limit the amount of content we pass on, and it has to be well structured. By grouping information into logical blocks, we will make best use of the working memory's capacity. From a learning perspective, it is important to know that the working memory is interacting with the long-term memory. If I face a challenge, the working memory will try to obtain as much information from the long-term memory as possible. What do I know about this issue? What similar situations have I experienced in the past? Where did this occur? How did this feel? And so on. Based on this information, the working memory decides what to do. Afterwards, the information is updated and passed on back into the long-term memory. Here are a couple of conclusions for brain-friendly learning. The learning will be much more effective if I first activate my long-term memory, for example, by reflecting on what I already know about the subject and by formulating questions that I want to find answers to. For this reason, I included this small exercise in the beginning of the video. The second conclusion relates to the fact that the brain splits information into different categories and stores it in various locations. There are brain regions that store information about forms, about colors, emotions, places, events, etc. So the conclusion is that if we address different sensory channels, the information will be easier passed on to the long-term memory and it will be easier to recall when needed. Let's move on to some practical recommendations for presenting content. Be aware about the purpose of your communication and adapt your language to the audience. Use examples, avoid difficult terms, keep to the facts, visualize information. All this might seem obvious, however, many presenters do fall already at this hurdle. Pictures, metaphors, stories, and questions are very effective tools to address different sensory channels and to activate the learner's brains. For example, to decode a metaphor, the learner has to actively engage with it. If I ask you, what are the similarities between the human brain and the Formula One car, this will surely get you thinking. The learner's brains will be more receptive if you first lay out the bigger picture of your topic by giving an overview of what you will present and by explaining its relevance to the audience. There are various methods we can apply to effectively structure our content. Personally, I am a big fan of mind mapping, which I use to organize my thoughts, to present information, and to offer participants a tool for reflection. There's lots of information about mind mapping available on the internet, so I will not go deeper into this. For the presentation of content, also written content, you might find the flipped pyramid is another useful tool for organizing content, which is widely applied in journalism. I start out with the most important information, then move on to relevant details, and finally add other information that might or might not be of interest to my audience. I want to emphasize the importance of creating a connection with our audience, to establish eye contact, to react to participants' nonverbal feedback, for example irritation or sleepiness, to ask for feedback, to clarify what has or has not been understood, or to involve participants by asking questions. All these things might again seem obvious, but are often rather difficult to do in practice, because in order to be able to react to my audience, I have to be prepared to adapt my presentation. Finally, I want to emphasize the importance of creating a connection with your audience. To establish eye contact, to react to participants' nonverbal feedback, for example irritation or sleepiness, to ask for feedback, to clarify what has or has not been understood, and to involve participants by asking questions might seem obvious things to do, but can be rather difficult to do in practice. In order to react to my audience, I have to be willing and able to adapt my presentation. In my final slide, I want to present the SQ3R method, a widely popular active reading strategy that was developed way back in the beginning of the 1940s by the American educational psychologist Francis Frank Pleasant Robinson. Also today, this model is widely used and offers a good tool for learning in a brain-friendly manner. I believe that this strategy can nicely be transferred to presenting content in education. For this purpose, I propose to adapt the 5 steps in the following way. First, survey. Give an overview of your presentation. What topics will you cover and what will be the structure? Second, question. Get participants thinking. You could organize a brief group work where the learners reflect on what they already know about the topic and what they want to learn about it. 3. Read. Make your presentation, wherever possible, related to the participant's background and needs. 4. Recite. Give a summary in which you highlight your main points. And finally, recall. Give the participants the opportunity to reflect on the presentation and draw their own conclusions. Get feedback.